I always wondered in a city which was majority renter why the city of Los Angeles didn't make more renter-friendly policies, and now I know why. So besides the incredible, awful racism, homophobia, just arrogance that was displayed on those tapes, what they were actually discussing was redistricting.
Please welcome to the stage friend of the show and Los Angeles City Councilwoman, it's Nithya Raman. Hi, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I'm glad you can make it. The last time you were on this show, thank you. The last time you were on the show, about halfway through, I started coughing and couldn't stop and had to leave the stage, and I didn't have COVID, but it was really uncomfortable. I think for you.
No, it was fine for me.
Oh, well, you have to say that now. Okay, so first of all, I have to tell you something.
Yes.
I came home and a sign for your opponent was in front of my house.
What?
And I pulled it out and replaced it with a lawn sign for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Immediately.
That. Thank
but
you.
I don't know how long it was there. I'm just saying. I just want you to know that I didn't know.
Okay.
So this is going to be a pretty hard-hitting interview. Okay, so all right. So I really wanted to talk to you because I think, we spend a lot of time on this show and just in our lives thinking about all the ways in which Republicans are standing in our way. But in California, Republicans aren't standing in our way, right?
For the most part.
In terms of who's elected, right?
Yeah.
This is a Democratic city in a Democratic county in a Democratic state. And yet, getting progressive change done is really difficult.
Very hard.
And so I first wanted to say, so you are in this race, and I think people in California maybe understand this, maybe they don't, but outside they don't. We have what's called a jungle primary, which we need a new name for, by the way.
Yeah.
But
very awkward word.
Wild. But basically, can you just talk a little bit about why this jungle primary has become such a challenge for electing progressives in the city?
Well, so across California, and it works slightly differently at the local level than it does at the statewide level, but we have a primary system where you don't always have a Republican primary and a Democratic primary. You just have a primary, and then the top two vote getters go on to the general election, whether or not they're from the same party. And so that's what happens across the state. At the local level, if you get more than 50% in the primary, you actually win outright. And I think both of those ways of organizing elections can work against progressives, because if you have a primary election that decides the outcome of an election, basically, progressives often don't vote in primaries. Voter turnout is half of what it is in a normal election. And younger voters, renters, voters of color, they often don't vote in a primary at all. And so progressives often don't make it out of the primary. And then if you're in a general election, a progressive is not the best funded candidate. And so if you have top two people going on to a general election and it's a moderate Democrat versus a progressive Democrat, it's often very hard for a progressive Democrat to get elected against the flood of money that's coming in for the other candidate.
So let's talk about that flood of money that you're facing. So this is you're in your first term.
Yes.
And you were elected in part because you wanted to take on the housing crisis in the city.
Yes.
The crisis of unhoused people
Yes.
in your district and beyond your district. Mm-hmm. But there's been a lot of backlash from certain interest groups.
Yes.
And can you just talk about how that, first of all, can you just what is their problem with you, and what have they done as a result?
So, I always wondered in a city which was majority renter why the city of Los Angeles didn't make more renter-friendly policies, and now I know why. So over the last 3 years, so it's a 4-year term, I just finished 3 years and 2 months, and then I'll be, this is my last year of my first term, and hopefully I'll get reelected. But in my first 3 years, we passed the largest expansion of tenant protections in LA in 40 years. Including universal just cause eviction protections, which means you can't just get evicted because your landlord wants to make money. You have to get evicted for a certain set of reasons, right? And those eviction protections added protections to another 400,000 households, and they're really these are really powerful protections for tenants in the city of LA. And we've done a lot to make sure tenants are secure at a time when rents are rising really rapidly and there's an incredible amount of housing insecurity here. I also have faced an incredible amount of pushback as a result of exactly that work in this election. So we are facing, I'm having over $1 million spent against me in a local election for a city council race, $1 million plus. And most of that spending is coming from corporate landlords, including one corporate landlord who's put almost $500,000 into the race against me as he is carrying out the largest eviction in LA in decades. He's evicting 600 households on the West Side right now. And he owns a huge slew of properties across LA. And when he was asked by the LA Times why he was investing so much in negative campaigning against a sitting council member, he said, "We don't really comment on politics, but this is for shareholder value."
So one other thing that also happened is you faced pushback from within the council itself. Mm-hmm. Your district, I'm still in your district.
You are.
But luck, as luck would have it.
Yes.
So what happened? Just I think it is a good example, even if you're not from California, of just like the actual practical reality of what happens when someone who moves into actual elected office. What happened to your district?
So we have in LA, we don't have an independent redistricting process. We have a redistricting process that is council controlled. We draw the lines. There's a commission that offers us some suggestions, but ultimately the council has control over what the lines are. And every 10 years, there's a redistricting, and it's always a political fight. And this time, I was the newcomer on the council. I came in without the support of the political machine. And I don't know whether you remember those tapes that leaked.
Yeah.
Those horrifying tapes. So besides the incredible, awful racism, homophobia, just arrogance that was displayed on those tapes, what they were actually discussing was redistricting and how to draw the lines to benefit their own reelections and the reelections of their allies on the council. And what was discussed on the tapes was how they were going to redraw my lines so that I would have a very hard time getting reelected. And the council president, who said some of the worst things I've ever heard, also said, let's keep her on the fence. Let's keep the renters out of her district. Let's make sure she doesn't get reelected.
And that now, what ended up coming to pass was not there was what,
Yes.
right? You didn't end up in the version of the district, the version of the most difficult district for you to get reelected.
Well,
in.
there was a version of the district where I would have the district I'm in it originally went from Mid-City to Silver Lake into Sherman Oaks, so it was already a weirdly shaped district. There was a version of the district that would have had me in Winnetka.
So just very far away. Basically
Winnetka,
giving you
Canoga
a
Park.
narrow of more conservative and less the constituency that had elected you the first time.
Deep Valley district, basically. I still go into the Valley, so I managed to keep more of my district, but I lost the most of any council member. I lost 40% of my district, and my district now goes from northern Silver Lake to Reseda.
And so, and one of the things that I just find that I think is like worth talking about in this situation is, so you, despite these sort of obstacles, you do manage to get some progressive policies across the finish line. Can you just talk a little bit about how many people you have helped get into housing?
Yeah, so we have a whole effort in our district where we, rather than what Los Angeles had been doing for a long time, which was when you have an encampment, a tent encampment that's on the streets, what they used to do was just to do these cleanups that would push those individuals out of that area, and they would move to another sidewalk where they would do another cleanup, and they would move to another sidewalk. And that was really the process. Sometimes they would be put in jail, but mostly it was just shoving people around who were experiencing homelessness from sidewalk to sidewalk.
And just so people understand, LA is strange, and there's different peculiarities all over, but city council districts are kind of little fiefdoms that almost like you're like the mayor of this area. And
Yes.
so city council people would basically just try to get people out of their district into the neighboring district, right?
Yes, exactly. And you were incentivized to do so because somebody would be calling from your constituents would be calling, complaining about an encampment. The easiest way to respond to it, because it's incredibly hard to find housing for somebody, it's incredibly hard to put together the services and make sure that people are getting indoors. Why do that when you can just make them disappear, just shove them down the street, forgetting about the fact that these are individuals who are still going to be homeless when they're down the street. And so what we did in our district was very different. We put together a homelessness team. We found many more shelter options for the district. The reason why we have so many people who are living on the streets in Los Angeles is because we don't have enough shelter. We have less than a third of the shelter beds that we need for our total unhoused population. And so what we did in our district was to add shelter, which is hard. We found shelter beds, we raised money for motel and hotel vouchers and all of that. And we actually managed to get people indoors, and we've housed hundreds of people. We've housed about 600 people across the district just through our office's work.
What have you just sort of, especially for people that are listening that are not connected to Los Angeles politics at all, somewhere else, like what have you just learned in going from being on the outside to being on the inside about when it is time to kind of draw a line and fight, and when you have to get pragmatic and make deals with the people that aren't all the way with you?
Los Angeles city politics is interesting because there's only 15 people on the council, right? And it's a council which has very few people who I would say identify themselves as progressives. And you need a minimum of 8 votes for things to pass. Sometimes you need up to 10 votes, depending on the nature of the thing that you're voting on. And so there is no way to make change happen on the council without building alliances. And so there is a lot of pragmatism and coalition building that is inherent in the work in LA City Council that I think is can be frustrating for people who want I think a more clear pathway on every decision. It can be a very, very difficult place to navigate because each decision has challenges. You don't want to alienate partners that you can work with to actually make material change for locals. And that has been hard. That has been really, really hard. And I would say I wasn't really involved in politics before either, right? So I was an urban planner by training. I did a lot of work in the nonprofit sector. I ran this volunteer group in my neighborhood. And I think what I've tried to do is to move through this work with a feeling that most people want the same things for Los Angeles that I do and that people in my community did. And really tried to build that coalition and tried to make sure that people who never were engaged in local politics were actually engaged in fighting for those things too. So I've really tried to move through this in that way. And I think that absolutely requires building coalitions.
Can you tell the mayor to finish the airport?
Yes, I have told her.
Nithya Raman, everybody. Good luck. See everybody.